Okay, everybody. Well, you requested for the neuro set workout regarding the bridges. Now, bridging, this is definitely one of my weakest moves of the big six. I've long struggled with this. In fact, a confession, when I first got into combat conditioning, I couldn't even meet the beginner standard for this first step in combat conditioning. So while these bridges aren't the most pretty and they're not perfect by a long shot, they're a hell of a lot better than what I started out with. So first we start off, of course, with our grinder reps. These are my regular style bridges, the more advanced bridge style that I can do. And I'm getting about 5 to 6, maybe 7 repetitions. Very smooth, very slow. That's what the grind reps are all about. I'm also, you can't really see it here, but I'm trying to basically squeeze the floor together with all of the bridge variations. Bridges are a pulling exercise, not necessarily a push dominant exercise. So then for the speed, I got the explosive style tabletop bridges that I got going on here, pulling particularly with the glutes and hamstrings. Glute emphasis, hamstring emphasis, and the back is a secondary aspect to the exercise, whereas the bridge that you saw before is a little bit more back dominant. This is a little more hamstring dominant. So again, it's a 2-to-1 ratio, and then we hold in the isometric. I've got a clock on the wall that I'm watching, holding for about 10 to 15 seconds or so. This really burns the hell out of the hamstrings. It really surprised the heck out of me how difficult it was to hold this position and keep the hamstrings contracted throughout the position, even though I had just done the speed reps beforehand. And this isn't terribly surprising to me, actually, now that I think about it, because I've long suffered from hamstring weakness in the past. When I was doing a lot of long mountain bike races, and even in things like Taekwondo, I would get a lot of cramping in my hamstrings. And yeah, sure, dehydration is part of that and so on, but a lot of muscle, neuromuscular issues stem from just weakness in the muscle. Once again, of course, no editing going on here, so you can take a look. I've got about a minute of rest period in between the 3 Neuro-Mass sets here, and I'm just kind of stretching things out, loosening them up, getting the muscles to be ready for the next set, and not really doing anything too active in between in the rest periods. So I'm watching the clock there, and we're gonna start right off once again with the grinders. It's worth noting that the PTR method that I discuss in my chain training ebook at reddeltaproject.com is in influence here. So I'm getting on the floor, I'm turning on the muscles, then I'm lifting up and applying resistance. So PTR stands for position, tension, then resistance, because at the end of the day, it all depends on how well you can use tension in your own muscles. And it is more beneficial if you can call on tension in the muscles before applying resistance, because once you put on resistance, then all of a sudden it's a very reactive state for your muscles to be in. But if you turn on the tension first, then you're more proactive. So as you can see there, I'm only getting a few repetitions. I really can't really relate to folks when they say bridges aren't much of a strength exercise. This is all a flexibility exercise. I don't really see it much as a strength movement. I can't relate to that, because as you can kind of see with my level of bridging that I'm doing, 5 to 6 reps is a real struggle for me. I can't get a whole lot more outside of that. So the bridge is definitely a strength move. It's not just like a stretch move that you see in like the Trinity, or the trifecta rather, in combat conditioning 2, where flexibility is the focus. Yes, there is a flexibility component to bridges, mobility, but is definitely a strength move for sure. So that one was a real burner there on the table bridges. And once again, just resting. And you can see too, the technical erosion that I have from one set to the next. My reps are getting much lower, my range of motion is getting much lower, I'm not getting nearly as good a technique from one set to the next. It's just a simple fact that bridges require a lot of strength. And I think a large part of that is, again, keeping in mind that bridges are a pulling exercise. You're basically trying to squeeze the floor together with your posterior chain, which I think this makes sense from use of a posterior chain, because a lot of other exercises for using those muscle groups, things like deadlifts, swings, cleans, all great exercises in their own right. But if we think of like the flexion exercises on the front of the body, you're working the abs and the anterior chain, we're flexing and moving the body forward. But with things like swings and so forth, we're bending over and then we're just coming up to straight. But there's a lot more potential that we're not tapping into by fully extending the back, the full posterior chain as much as it goes. So I think there's a large argument to be said for the value that bridges bring to the strength of the posterior chain. Here we go, grind set, last set, best set, as I say, although usually I like the 3-set model because the first set is kind of like I'm really getting into it. The second set is usually by far my best set, and then my third set is starting to get more on the downhill, and things are starting to fall apart a little bit. You can see the range of motion's really just going down from there. Only now am I starting to really get to the point where I can get tension along my whole posterior chain, which I think is very common for a lot of people when it comes to bridging in general, is because it's hard to get tension from your heels to your shoulder blades and vice versa. So I think that's another thing that could be said for bridges. And we go, getting on the last few speed, the pump reps as I like to call it, trying to get the glutes and the hamstrings mashing together, holding. It just hurts. I mean, at this point, it is a serious torture fest for the hamstrings and the back, and down we go. So there you go. Let me know if you have questions down below. Till then, be fit, live free.